Hey everyone, welcome back to a Miniature Painting 101. As always, my name is Jay, and this is Miniature Painting 101, a series of videos where I teach you all about miniature painting. And this is part 38, Ryza Rust. This is a tutorial talking about dry brushing rust onto miniatures using the new Ryza Rust paint from Citadel range. And there are several ways to mimic rust on miniatures. I've already covered one in a previous video. The first one is using weathering pigments, and if you really like to learn how to do weathering pigments, check out part 29. I use a set of weathering pigments to do rust on a Def Dread. And the second way is to dry brush similar colors over your previous colors to make it look like rust. And there are benefits of using pigments. First of all, you tend to get a great tonal variation, so there's a great variation of colors in the rust. Number two, you get a deeper effect. It is usually darker and more deeper. And three, it tends to look more realistic when you use pigments and you fix them in place using alcohol. However, there are benefits to using dry brushing. For example, it's cheaper, you don't have to buy all the pigments, it's quicker, you get a more subtle effect, so if you're looking for a much more subtle rust effect, go with dry brushing, and there's no harsh chemicals to deal with, so you don't need to deal with the pigments or the alcohol to fix them in place, so it tends to be a little more safer if you are a younger hobbyist. And today we'll be using Ryza Rust, one of the cool new colors for the Citadel range designed to mimic rust. Now you don't necessarily have to use Ryza Rust, but you guys requested that I do Miniature Painting 101s on all the new paints, so this one will be specifically using Ryza Rust instead of dry brushing a similar color onto miniatures. And Ryza Rust is a dry paint from the Citadel range, meaning if you open it up, it looks like it's already been dried out. It is very heavy on pigments, very light on medium. So it tends to be very favorable for dry brushing because it doesn't have much medium to wipe off when you want to paint. And today we will be using this Kilocan to get a rust effect on it using the Ryza Rust. So we'll be applying the Ryza Rust through some heavy dry brushing and some light dry brushing on the Kilocan. Now when dry brushing rust onto a miniature, the key is to mix up your strokes, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So today we won't be using a palette because we're using straight out of the bottle since it's hard to get into a palette, and we're going to use just a standard brush that I use for dry brushing, one with a nice flat head, and that's all you get. So dip it in the paint, get some on your brush. Now it's a little bit too much, but whatever, doesn't matter anyway because we'll wipe it off on our towel. Remember to do different directions so you get a nice consistency on the brush, and simply apply it to the miniature by dry brushing. Now the key is, as I mentioned, when doing dry brushing onto a miniature, is you want to mix up your stroke directions and the heaviness of your dry brush. So feel free to use more pigments on your brush at some points than others, use lighter than at other points, and just mix up your directions because rust does not grow or rust does not happen in a uniform pattern. It happens more in a random pattern, and some parts are deeper, some parts are going to be more rusty than others. So to mimic that, you want to mix up your brush strokes. So heavy in some areas, light in others, mix up your brushes, and that's the key essentially. Another one is if you want to add a little bit more, another color to it, I'd suggest maybe a reddish tone. Ryza Rust is a very orangey tone, so if you want to make it look a little more realistic, feel free to add a red to it, but I'm just going to use strictly Ryza Rust today to show you how to use it and the effect that it produces, which I do like in the end. I do prefer using pigments personally when doing rust, but dry brushing your rust effect is a great quick way to get a rust effect on the miniature quickly and effectively. So as you can see here, I'm just mixing up the brushes and doing a variety of dry brushing. And you see I do load my brush quite frequently in this particular take. You'll see how many times I load my brush because when dry brushing, you do have to load your brush a lot and you do end up putting a lot on the towel, but that's okay, that's what it's designed for. And these dry paints are very nice in the sense that they don't have much medium, so you can just do a little bit on the brush and wipe off the remainder onto the towel, and they tend to go on quite nicely. And you can see I'm just focusing on all the areas of the model that are metallic or the paint, and you do get that nice subtle orange tone on the surfaces. If you want to go a little heavier, you'll get more of an orangey tone, but still it does tend to be a little more subtle of an effect than the pigments. But to be fair, all we're using is Ryza Rust. We don't need to use any fixers. We don't need to use a combination of pigments, so it's much cheaper and much quicker and less harsh. And that's it. As you can see, I'm just repeating this process on every surface of the miniature, the arms, the top, all the pipes, and I'm just mixing up the depth And then here we go. That's what it looks like when it's done. So now we apply the rust effects, and now it has that orangey rust texture to it. I think it does actually look pretty realistic. It just tends to be a little more orangey than using pigments, but still turned out pretty nicely. And it didn't take me very long to get this effect. And that's all you essentially do. So the key is to mix up your strokes, mix up the heaviness and the lightness, and just try to go on a variety and a random assortment of the areas. Don't want to go too uniform. And here's what the model looks like compared to the Def Dread from part 29. As you can see, the part 29 Def Dread, it does look a little more realistic, and it's much more deeper colors, much more red colors, as opposed to the Killacan, which is much more subtle, but that's okay. So thank you very much for watching this episode of Miniature Painting 101. I really hope you enjoyed it and learned something about Ryza Rust. Stay tuned for part 39, which is just around the corner. Next Monday, as always, rain or shine. But if you can't wait till next Monday, check out The Warp. Click on the link below for a free 14-day trial to my premium YouTube channel, where not only will you get to see the next 6 months worth of Miniature Painting 101 episodes, you'll get to see dozens of start-to-finish painting tutorials, battle reports, and just some awesome wargaming content. So go ahead and check it out. I think you'll really like it. So thank you very much for watching. Until next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.